More encouraging of fasting, which is really just suffering. Discipline brings freedom. So here we have misery brings freedom. Just the inversion of what you'd naturally expect. Matthew 6:16 through 18. When you fast, when you pray, when you give. So we've got superstition, suffering, and we want your money. Fasting shows that you are willing to sacrifice yourself, although that really shouldn't matter to them, since we've repeatedly seen in other sermons that they don't value the individual. And that's a consistent theme. Again and again and again, you'll see it. I've brought it up in every one of these videos just about. This is from November 30th, 2008. Randy Alcorn. It shows that you will use the time for a different purpose. It is to reestablish priorities. God is more important than food. So that should tell you something. It is more important that you adhere to their agenda and suffer than it is for you to actually take care of yourself. Because again, they don't care about you, the individual. They don't care about the self. John 4 verse 34, God's will should be your food. Of course, we've seen elsewhere that they suggest that man does not live by bread alone, but by the word of God. So even in that verse, we've got something that doesn't line up with the message that they're trying to send in the sermon. If you fast once a week, it will remind you of the needs of others. So this is kind of like the if you don't eat your peas, you need to think of the kids who are starving in China. Well, how is eating your peas going to help the kids in China? It's the same thing except inverted. Not eating your peas isn't going to help them any more than eating them will. And again, it's this thing of you don't matter. It's always someone else who matters. But you do not. You are not one of those other people. It's this magical separation between you and someone else that exists. Somehow you are not included in the entirety of humanity of people you should take care of. Everybody else you're supposed to take care of, but you, the self, nope, you're not supposed to take care of that person. That person's, you can just write them off. And then they're explicit about it. It says, it stops indulgence. It destroys the need for self. It breaks our self. It's just, it's nuts. It's sick and it's crazy. When you have nothing, you will still have grace. And now you can replace grace there for the cult's priorities. When you have nothing, you will still have the cult's priorities. That's all you've got. You don't have some magical entity helping you out. You've got the cult, the people in the cult, and you've got the cult's doctrines going on. Get rid of bad friends. 1 Corinthians 15 verse 33. Bad company corrupts good character. I think this is within the same week or within maybe even the same day. That they're talking about Jesus at Jacob's well, and then they're saying serving lets you meet with tax collectors, Samaritans, prostitutes, blah blah blah, so sinners. So you're supposed to pretend like you're buddying up to people, but you don't want to get too friendly with them. And then they've got a quote from Ravi Zacharias, which I tried one time watching part of his video, and I couldn't even get past the title because he was making logical fallacies before he even started with his sermon. Moral resistance to acknowledge God as ruler is why people don't believe the Bible. People don't believe the Bible because they've read the Bible. Moral resistance to acknowledging God is moral resistance against genocide, deceit, hatred of humanity, on and on and on, just evil. Evil is why people don't agree with the Bible. The Bible is why people don't believe in the Bible. And the Bible is partly also why people don't believe in God. Sanity is the main reason for not believing in God. The whole equating good with light and bad with darkness thing is, I mean, it's evident across cultures, but what it comes down to is that there's some people who are afraid of the dark, and then there's people who just realize it for what it is. It's just dark, okay? There's no moral connection between photons and ethics. Islam has the whole light-dark thing. Christianity has it. Judaism has it. Yin and Yang has it. What would that be? Shintoism? But it's basically when you've got a religion that's pushing this whole light-dark dualism? It's basically their word against someone else's, and they're just pulling random verses from their holy text to try to back that up. There's nothing really inherently, there's nothing inherent that connects those 2 points, though. In one religion, you'll have, you know, the lightness be their thing, and then in another religion, that would be the dark. So there's no consistent cultural, it's not even consistent across doctrines in Christianity, or denominations in Christianity. It's just a way for them to go, they're the bad guys, they're the dark. You don't want the dark to get you, do you? And really it's just, they're trying to scare you into buying into what they're selling. You know, it's this fear of isolation. Matthew 5 verses 14 and 16. Outside the church, our light is dimmed. So you don't want to be an outsider, do you? Because without the cult, you're nothing. And that message was preached way back in December of 2008. And I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be preaching the same message nowadays, because you've got the dualism coming from multiple other religions, and it doesn't look good when you're not the only one pushing it. December 14th, 2008. The Magi sacrificed their time to visit the Christ, and time is one of the most important gifts. Being there is a way to show they care. They just want your service. They've got to have bodies for church projects. Luke 16:9. Use worldly wealth to get friends, that you will be welcomed into the kingdom. So again, it's this selling a bridge to people of, if you give us your money, we'll give you a kingdom. You have to be dead, but we'll give it to you. Instead of using your money to actually improve your life in this world or the lives of other people. It's just, hey, use your money to con people into getting into the cult. Jesus in a manger in a smelly, loud barn. It is a picture of our lives as they should be, putting ourselves aside. Once again, the self is bad, the self is worthless. You should be living in misery and filth. You're not worth being brought out of misery. You should dwell in it. Phil 2, verses 4 and 5. Don't do anything for yourself. Treat others better than yourself. It's right there, okay? It's like if I were to even explicitly bring these quotes out to my family and go, this is what they said. They would just say, well, I don't believe that. It's like, they said it. I'm not imagining these things. They didn't just say it once. They said it multiple times over the course of years. This is a not healthy way of it's not a healthy way of thinking. It's not a healthy way of living. It's not a healthy way of raising your children. It's bad for you. And when they say sacrifice, what they really mean is they want you to sacrifice on behalf of the church. Because the church takes care of itself, the organization, not the people, but the organization itself and the agenda of the church. And the people that are higher up in the Ponzi scheme, the preachers, the elders, the deacons, the people in charge, the staff, those are the people that are benefiting from your sacrifice. It's not some nebulous set of values or anything. It's people. It says the incarnation is apparent and at work when it comes to the sacrifice of ourselves. It's like if they were to preach that at a workplace, you would have people leaving that workplace. Because you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to take care of yourself, take care of your job. That's it. Oh, and you're not allowed to complain about it either when you... See, complaining is a way for you to verbalize and externalize what you're really thinking and feeling. And they don't want to hear that because they're looking for slave labor. They're looking for indentured servants. They don't want somebody who's actually got a mind of their own that can think for themselves. Did I already read that? Phil 2 verses 14 and 15. You shine and are a light. There's the creepy thing again with the dualism. When you do things without complaint. Be content with salvation. It is all you need. And it is all the church will provide you. When you actually need help, I mean, maybe you'll get like a potluck, some people pitching in from the church. But aside from that, if you're on like a faith-based, tax-evading healthcare plan, they're not really going to take care of you. Not when you really need it. Be content with salvation that doesn't exist. It is all you need. We are blessed. No, you're not. Yet still complain. We are blessed, yet still complain. Maybe life is hard. It's hard because you keep giving up your money to a con artist organization. Maybe life is hard. Still we are saved. No, you're not. You've never shown that there is an afterlife of any form. Unless you're talking about bugs eating you, in which case, yeah, there's an afterlife. It's just nothing involving human consciousness. But when have you ever shown that you care about human consciousness? Remember the innocence of Jesus. Yeah, I seem to recall him saying, I'm going to, when I come back, I'm going to behead the leaders that say I am not king. Poor innocent terrorist. His torture and death. And this is even assuming that Jesus was a historical figure, which we have no historical evidence for. We've got writers like Tacitus who lived hundreds of years after the fact, and even then they only have a passing mention of people that were Christians. Not that there was an actual person on which it was based. December 24th, 2008. This is another one of those things that I was dragged to, unfortunately. Humans would never create a savior as lowly as Jesus, in spite of the fact that they keep adding on more and more and more stuff after Matthew, Mark, and Luke. so that they've actually got somebody who they can I was going to say sell out. You know, you've got to have somebody who's powerful in order to sell them. So like you'll see the miracles and the claims of divinity and just the aspects of divinity just grow after starting with John and, you know, the other books of the Bible, the Pauline epistles, and just stuff after that. So saying that Jesus was just a poor lowly savior is just nonsense, because, you know, the scriptures are very clear about in the later ones, you know, inconsistently so, that Jesus was not lowly. I mean, he's very egocentric even. There's nothing humble about him anyway. Jesus is the uniter of enemies into friends, except for the Sanhedrin and the Romans. Do your works to glorify our Father who is in heaven. Glory to God, not even to the pure followers. Of course, that money doesn't go directly to God. And the servant, the free labor that the church gets, that doesn't go to God, of course. It goes to people. But they've got to give, when it comes to the actual credit, you're not allowed to keep any of it for yourself. You're just supposed to work for free and not even get any credit. Song of Solomon, or just Songs 1 verse 1, delight in the law. Of course, when it suits them, they'll then say, oh, the Old Testament is fulfilled, we don't need to turn to it anymore. Or when you point out the crimes of the Old Testament, they'll say it doesn't apply anymore. They're perfectly fine in using it in sermons as long as it suits their purposes. They just try to let the Bible say whatever they want it to say, which is one way of handling it, and the other way of handling it is by looking at the scriptures and going, oh, this is actually disgusting. I'm not going to listen to any of this. 1 Peter 4 verse 10, use your gifts to administer God's grace, as opposed to using your gifts to better your lives, the lives of your family, your friends, and society at large. Nope, it's got to go to the agenda of the cult. Don't make your life better, it is a prison. You need to be saved from it, from sin. Does this sound familiar to anybody? That life is a prison, and maybe you need to get rid of it, and the church is more than willing to help separate you from it? They've already shown that they're willing to separate you from your money. Some churches are willing to separate you from your family, your friends. We already saw that they were willing to separate you from your friends if they're not the right kind of friends. In other words, the kind of friends who would try to rescue you from the cult and try to break you out of it and try to get you to see common sense. Life is a prison. Life is easy if you want it to be. Life is good and happy if you want it to be. Christians, however, think that life is a prison and is inherently miserable because they are anti-life. You know, you hear how they are pro-life, but only for very certain conditions. They are pro-forced pregnancy. They are pro not allowing someone who is suffer to, you know, they're against assisted suicide or assisted dying for people who are terminally ill. They're pro-suffering. They're pro-misery. And in order to get that misery, you have to be alive. So they just try to prolong life, however miserable it is. They don't try to make life better because they profit from misery. Life is antithetical to what Christianity is. So they hate it, and they've got to ruin it. They've got to ruin it for anybody who's within the cult and everybody who's outside of it. January 25th, 2008. Obey what God commands you to do. That is the first time I've ever heard this from the church. I mean, actually it's the bajillionth, but they've got to send that message or give us your money at least once per sermon. They have to remind you that you are property of the church, because the church is the intermediary of God. There is one way, and it is okay to be urgent, impolite, and bossy about it. Christians are some of the most unpleasant, rude people on earth. Well, I should just say religious people are. Because they will stop at nothing to grab as much power for themselves and as much money and to rule others in an authoritarian manner as they possibly can. Christianity is dehumanizing. John 10, Christ's followers are sheep. Lost sheep are unbelievers. So whether or not you're a believer, and I keep putting that in quotes because they try to put all beliefs on a level plane. They're not. All knowledge is not on the same plane. The things that they call knowledge are actually lies and falsehoods and inaccuracies and misleading statements or just factually incorrect stuff. There's nothing to believe in there. There's no knowledge there. It's just hokum. We send ourselves to hell by not accepting Christ. God created hell, right? Because Satan can't create anything, and apparently humans are incapable of creating anything, because anytime the new technology comes out, Christians say, well, this is based on the natural world, which is created by God. But we know in Isaiah that God is explicitly stated as creating evil. I mean, this is coming from a first-person perspective from God. And hell is just, you know, it's terroristic threatening. You'll die and then you'll burn. What is the difference between that and some terrorist coming up to you and saying, I'm going to kill you and then I'm going to burn your body? There really isn't one. You're just saying, look, I'm trying to help you, but I'm going to kill you and burn your body. Revelation 2:10, follow him to death and he will give you life. That sounds like good advice for a suicide bomber. Colossians 1 verse 21, this is January 25th, 2009. Justin something or other. Colossians, once you sin, you are alienated. Who is doing the alienating? Could it possibly be a large organization that has social influence and can alienate people via excommunication? Sin separates us from God. Sin is just doing what God does not want us to do. It is basically the exercise of free will. So when you say, don't sin, you're basically saying, don't exercise your free will. You're allowed to have your free will, you're just not supposed to use it for anything. We can't pay for the sins we committed. What do you call it when you have a debt you can't pay back? Like inherently unpayable. That's permanent indentured servitude, which is the same thing as slavery. So when people say, well, Lord used to mean, first of all, people don't understand where the word Lord comes from in Old and Middle English. Second of all, Lord in the New and Old Testament meant master, slave master. And that's what you become when you have a debt you can't pay back and you become a permanent indentured servant. You're a slave either way. For either way, you're a practical slave. And of course the church loves that, because they love people that they would be able to command in a totally authoritarian manner. People who have no freedom of choice. This is why the Bible was and still is popular in the South, because the South owned slaves. And what better to back up your belief that people should be enslaved than a book that says, hey, slavery is okay. Romans 12:1, we are to live sacrificial lives. Be a slave, sacrifice, give up your stuff, give us your money. February 1st, 2009, Chad. Romans 8, God is deeply involved in his creation using human agents. So what's the difference between human agents that don't have God using them and... See, the whole thing is just, it's not that it doesn't make sense, because I see what you're saying. It's just internally and externally logically inconsistent. It's like saying, everybody has a little magical man living inside their brain. You can't see him, but he's there, and he's influencing you. He's influencing everybody. In fact, there's a network of them. It's a conspiracy. They're all over the place, and they're all interconnected, and they're all ruled by one tiny little man. And he lives inside the brain of preachers. So you've got to listen to those preachers, because they know what they're talking about. Because they're all agents. All of us are agents. Some of them are good agents. Some of them work to benefit the head magical elf that lives inside the preacher's head. Some of the people that work against them, those are bad people, but they still work to further the goals of the little magical man living inside the preacher's head. And how can you tell what the difference is between someone who doesn't have one of those little magical men living inside their head and someone who's just a regular person walking around who doesn't have that little magical person in their head? Well, you can't. See, they're invisible, and the only way that you can tell that that person is there is through faith. Identify when you are in God's domain, which is everywhere. Yet in the same sermon, they're very much like, we have ruined the earth. And the earth is terrible. So which is it? Does God control the earth or doesn't he? Because if he controls the earth, then he's doing a bad job of it. But if he doesn't control the earth, then you shouldn't be worshiping him. Sermon notes. Dave Stone, January 31st and February 1st. Tithing is commanded. We are to give according to our prosperity. So there again is the donation creep. Giving a tithe is not enough for the church. They always want more and more and more from you. February 8th, 2009. Start giving small. Sacrifice increasingly more. See, what they really want is total domination of your life. It's not God that wants control over your life. It's the church that wants control over all of your financial assets. I mean, this is typical cult pattern. You have to sign a contract that gives power of attorney over to them. And this is what churches eventually, are going to start pushing for once they get more and more control politically. Sacrifice is giving up something you love for something that you love more. Well, you love Jesus, don't you? But give us your money. Poor people give as much percentage as a $90,000 a year person do. Yeah, people stay poor because they keep giving their money away. You want to know why you're in financial straits? Look to the church. They say sin brings death right here. Who's going to be bringing that death? Could it be Christian terrorists, maybe? There really isn't that much difference between the Christian church and Saudi Arabia. Broadcast over.